This is a shir in Likutei Sichos, Chelek, Yutes, Parshas Ki Tetzeh, the second Sicha. Regarding the mitzvah of making a maike, a fence on your roof. So the pasuk says, there's two details. One, it says when you build a new house, you should make a maike, bais chodosh. You should make a maike, you should make a fence to your roof. So it's not understood, asked the Rebbe. Why does the pasuk say dafka a new house? The language of the pasuk is bais chodosh. The din is that you're obligated to put up a fence in your house, not just when you build a new house, also when you buy an old house. And if it doesn't have a fence, you're obligated to put on a fence. It doesn't have to do with dafka buying a new house. So the Sifri states that when you mishas chidashtoi, or whatever you read this, from the moment that you make the new house, or the Rebbe says in the footnote in the Yalkut Shemeni, the word is chidushay, from the time of its becoming new, in other words, from the time it comes into being, you need to put on a fence. In other words, unlike mezuzah, where mezuzah becomes an obligation when you move into the house. With regards to putting up a fence on the roof, the moment that you make the house, you have the obligation to put up a fence. So the moment it's new, in other words, the moment it's been created in this world, but not to say that an old house you don't need. The chiddush is that the chiyuv comes right away, as soon as you build it. However, the language of the pasuk doesn't fit in a smooth way, because since what the Sifri is saying, that the obligation for putting up a fence is immediately when you become the owner of this house, even before you move into it. So why does the Torah hint at this halacha by saying when you build a bais chodosh, new house? From that it sounds very, very clear that it's only when it's a new house. Why didn't the Torah use a lashon that would emphasize an expression that would emphasize that the obligation to build a fence is of every house as soon as the house comes to his possession? It could have been another language, not chodosh. It sounds like it's something got to do with the newness of the house. Second aspect, says the Rebbe, later in the pasuk it says, why make a fence? It says, Ki yipel ha'noifel mimenu, for the one who is falling, the falling one will fall from it, from the roof. In other words, it could be somebody who will fall from the roof. But the language here is difficult to understand. This pasuk doesn't say, the pasuk trying to say that nobody should fall off the roof. So why are we saying that the faller should not fall? He didn't fall. We're going to protect him from falling. Why is he called a faller? So the Gemara answers this and says, look, the truth is that if somebody were to fall, really he's worthy to fall from the 6 days of creation. In other words, this is in his destiny. This Hashem has a plan for him to fall. However, no, so he's a neifel, he's a faller. But the Torah says, since megalgelin zchus al yidei zakai, Hashem brings merit through somebody who is meritorious. Good things happen through good people. V'chayiv al yidei chayev, and negative things happen through people that are not guilty. So therefore, look, put up a fence so that this faller, he's going to fall somewhere. He shouldn't fall on your property. In other words, the mitzvah will make you meritorious that this falling shouldn't happen by you. But he's already called a faller. However, this answer Rashi brings in the Torah. The language here of the Rebbe is fascinating in my limited understanding. Because Ober means, however, this answer Rashi brings in his explanation on the Torah. However, if you really study Pshutei Shel Mikra, Pshat, the simple reading of the pasuk, this answer doesn't seem to be so smooth, because the word neifel means the faller. Not that he's worthy to fall, but it's a hoive, it's a present tense, and it's a descriptive term about the person. He's a faller, but he hasn't fallen. You're putting up a fence. Interesting that Rebbe quotes in the Ha'ara 11 that in the Ibn Ezra, who's also an explainer of Pshat, and similarly the Rebbe says in other Mefarshim, that Ibn Ezra says he's called a faller because in the end he will fall. He's destined to fall. And it continues the Ibn Ezra, there are many words without the ability to even count them all, that they are given a name because of the result of what is going to take place. Says the Rebbe, but this itself requires explanation. Why should they be called about their future, about what's going to happen inevitably to them in the future? And says the Rebbe that also to the Ibn Ezra, it seems that this pirush, this explanation, is not so vada, is not so definite by him, because in the continuation of the explanation of the Ibn Ezra, he uses an interesting phrase. He says, and we will not know if this is the way of the lashon, of the language of the Torah, or this is, in other words, that the faller is called because he's going to fall, or this is words of prophecy. The Torah is saying, if he's going to fall, it means he was meant to fall, as if predicting the future. Okay. At any rate, the Rebbe says, even though Rashi brings it, but it's not a simple pshat. So this leaves room for explanation. Ois Beis, the Rebbe brings in a concept here, which now, in 2021, when we're dealing with additional waves of coronavirus, I think we will find very pertinent. It says in Pirkei Rebbe Lezer that the reason why it says that the Eibishter created the world in a way that the northern side is not completed, like the Gemara says that the world was created like a patio with one wall left unwalled, and it's the northern wall that's not surrounded, so to speak. The northern side of the world is not completed, is not surrounded by a wall. Whatever that means, I didn't research it. I'm not sure how to explain that. But the Ruach Tzveinis, the northern side, says the Gemara, is not completed, is not surrounded, so to speak, with a wall. Why is it that way? So Pirkei Rebbe Lezer says, because if somebody will come and say, hey, he's the God, he's the creator, so people will tell him, he'll be challenged and say, okay, you're the creator, come and finish off that side. Hashem will say, come and finish off the side I left unfinished. In other words, says the Rebbe, in order that the created beings shouldn't have any mistake and start to think that they don't need the creator of the world and the one who manhiga, the one who führt on mit der Welt, the one who manages, directs the world. In other words, if somebody were to say, I don't need God, don't need anything that's above our mortal capabilities. We can do everything. So that Hashem already created the world in such a way that they themselves have in their own created being something lacking, which they themselves cannot overcome, they cannot complete. And therefore they feel that they need to come onto a higher power. I mean, I can't help but see the relevance here when the world is grappling with something that even after, okay, vaccines and so on, then there's all kinds of other challenges that leaves science and medicine and humanity baffled. There's a God. So there's a purpose, says the Rebbe, for things that alert created beings to something that they need a higher power. Same thing, says the Rebbe, is when it comes to Seichel. In order a person who's a Baal Seichel, who has a person of intellect, shouldn't convince themselves that with their intellectual capabilities, with their seichel, they can understand everything. So Hashem also implanted within the world of intellect that there needs to be a reliance on things that are higher than intellect. Square brackets, says the Rebbe, for example, in order to understand intellectual concepts, first you need to understand the axioms. You need to understand the first basic rules of that intellect and the rules of wisdom, which according to those rules you can come to the later developments and conclusions, which are based, however, on certain axioms, certain foundational concepts in Seichel, which they themselves are not imperative of Seichel. You could argue those things too. So in other words, I don't understand this fully, I'll be honest, In other words, there are things within Seichel which are resting in our conscious. We know that they're actually, if we delve into them, they're resting on things that we don't fully understand, but we accept. In other words, Seichel itself, although we rely very heavily on our intellect and we try and understand things, and once we understand things, we feel in charge of them, so to speak, we understand even in Seichel that there are things we don't understand. There are things that we need that are above Seichel. Says the Rebbe that the same thing it is, lahavdil, it's the same way in Torah. Nigla of Torah, the revealed aspect of Torah, has come down in a way that we can understand it. It can even be understood by the Seichel of somebody who's not Jewish. In other words, it can be understood by pure intellect. You can understand Torah. Says the Rebbe in the footnote, but you could say that that's in order that there should be Bechira. However, in order to remember that in Torah, even the revealed aspects of Torah that are so understandable, in order to remember that they are godly seichel, so Hashem put certain things in nigla, in the revealed aspects of Torah, that however hard we'll analyze them and try and understand them, we won't be able to fully understand their meaning unless we also delve into the parallel teaching in the Pnimius Torah, in the inner aspect of Torah, the parts of Torah that are more associated with Chassidus and Kabbalah and so on. That those aspects of Torah are in an open way Hashem's intellect. In other words, the entire discussion in Pnimius Torah is about Hashem and godly things. They're openly godly. And through understanding the parallel of these concepts in Pnimius Torah, in the inner aspect of Torah, now we will be able to understand that there's a parallel that Hashem put in Nigla, in the revealed aspects of Torah, right? But really, it's really, in essence, Hashem's Seichel, which is higher than created beings. So that's why certain aspects of them remind us that in order to understand it, we have to go back to the upper sphere and understand it the way it is in Hasidic thought. Interesting, the Rabbi brings in footnote 16 that we know that there's a rule, even when the Gemara ends off and asks a question about an opinion it has accepted and says, Kashya, this remains difficult to explain, it doesn't mean that that's not the conclusion that the Gemara stays with. It doesn't cancel out the halacha that the Gemara has established. Kasha, in other words, sometimes something is left with a question that cannot be explained. It's the truth, but you can only explain it when you look at a higher level. So here says the Rebbe that we can say that this is one of the places where we see how to understand it fully. You need to go and look at it in the Pnimius, in the inner aspect of Torah. We'll say this about the mitzvah of making a fence. According to the inner explanation of what making a fence on a new house means, we'll understand why it says a new house, because the fence has very much is intrinsically bound up with the fact that it's a new house. And we'll also understand the second question we ask, what does it mean that the faller shouldn't fall? Why is he already, before he falls, why is he called a faller? Gimel. To understand this, the Rebbe prefaces, our sages tell us that when a person refers, when the Torah refers to the house of a person is his wife. To the extent that Rabbi Yosef says, I never called my wife, I called my wife my house. In other words, the essence of when one is married, this becomes the essence of their house. This becomes the stability of their house, right? And that's the inner meaning of Kitivna Bais Chodesh, when you build a new home. What does that mean? The time when a person begins to build a new home, in other words, the beginning of married life. When he builds building a home is with a wife. When a person now takes the obligation of providing parnasa, providing a livelihood on his shoulders. Rechaim, there's a concept, the sages use in the Gemara, Rechaim, a millstone on his neck. Now he's going to have to provide flour for making bread. The wife makes the bread, but he has to provide the grain. In other words, he has to get involved in providing a livelihood. The person has to go out and plow and plant and harvest and so on. So the Torah says when you go and you're starting to build a new home, you need to make a fence. Since it's a new home, it's something new that you're not yet accustomed to. Till now you've been in the yeshiva. So now you have to make a fence. In other words, those things that were sufficient for you to maintain your connection with Hashem, to serve Hashem in the way you were serving it before, when you were in the serene and segregated aspect, in the holy environment of pre-entering the workforce. So whatever was enough for you to maintain your spiritual integrity and serving Hashem then, it's not enough yet. Now you need to take on new fences. You need to take on new restrictions, both in thought, speech, and deed. And why, specifically when you come to this new form of work, do you need to make a fence? So the pasuk says, because the faller will fall. In other words, because by definition, this service, this avodah, this work is by a person in a movement of descent and falling. It's a downward motion. In other words, intrinsically, by definition, what we're doing is we're moving away from a life that's fully vested and submerged in Torah. What is a Jew doing before he gets married and going out to work? He's studying. He's fully immersed in revealed holiness. And now there's a descent, in a sense of falling. As the Rebbe points out in the footnote, the word falling actually fits very well with when we talk about the sparks that fell down, right? And that they will continue to fall unless the person elevates them when he engages, when he meets them. So this, by definition, getting into the workforce, building a house, getting married, entering the world of mundaneness by Hashem's instruction, but still, it's a descent. And hey, don't get scared by that, because actually the whole occupation, the fact that we move on to the next stage from the yeshiva into the world, is just like we talk about the descent of the neshama into this world. It's what Hashem wants, but it's called a descent, because it's descending from a place of pristine holiness. So therefore, there's a possibility, not just a possibility, there is almost a predictability. There's a prone, the neshama would be prone to getting affected by the gashmias. The person would get, very possibly, the word used here is olul. It's probable, so to speak, that the physicality of the world would cause the person to be downgraded and pulled down from his level. And if he's not extra scrupulously careful when he builds this new house, starts this new descent, this new this new work, this new mission in life, so not just will he not be able to elevate the physicality he's engaging in, on the contrary, he's actually going to be catapulted further downwards by the engagement in the physicality, because he hasn't protected himself properly in a way that he can elevate the Gashmis. The Gashmis is going to make Yipa ila Neifel. The one who's already descended will fall further unless you put up that fence. Dalit. Bayis also sometimes means the body of the person. In Avodas Hashem, it means generally birurim, those things we need to refine by our journey here on earth. What do we need to refine? We need to refine our body and everything that we interact with in the world, called Chelek ba'olam, his portion of the world. Everybody has his own body that he has to overcome, refine, use it for serving Hashem, and the things, his portion in the world with which he interacts. And that's called a Bayis Chodesh, a new house. In other words, when the journey here on earth is new. Why? Because first of all, says the Rebbe, the neshama, before it comes down, doesn't know anything about all this journey. It's up there saying, holy, 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 basking in the radiance of Hashem's light. And two, there's something very new. In this Aveda, there's a real chidush. There's something absolutely new here. What's so new? Similar to what we speak about when we talk about the hishavus, the creation of this world in general, the physical world. That even though there are many levels in the order of ishtalshlus, the way Hashem's light comes down in a way of progression till it can come and create a world. It starts from its source and it progresses downwards in each successive layer of diminishing the light to make it more palatable. Nonetheless, I skipped the square brackets for a minute. Nonetheless, the real chidush, the real newness is the creation of this physical world. As we know it says in Chassidus that creation of physicality from spirituality, even the most diminished level of spirituality. But that's a quantum leap, and there's no concept of something from nothing greater than this. To jump from spirituality, even after all the levels of ishtalshlus have been diminished, in order to allow for Gashmias, still, that leap from Ruchnis to Gashmias, there's nothing like it. It's ex nihilo, it's something from nothing, call it quantum leap. Going back to the square brackets, the Rebbe says in general, the light of Hashem after the tzimtzum, there's a first initial tzimtzum contraction where Hashem, so to speak, in order to create space, so to speak, for the world, he contracts, and then there's a light that comes forth, right? And that's why Ak, the level called Adam, Kadmon, primordial man, first level, which we call man, so to speak, Hashem's presence, right? Hashem, Adam Elyon, I mean, as you're talking supernal man, it's called Adam de Bria, the person of Adam of Bria, of creation, because it's in a sense, it's Yesh Me'ayin, something from nothing. There's also, we talk later on about the Kalim of Atzilus, also being a concept of Yesh Me'ayin, how much more so the world of Bria, but still, as the Rebbe says, physicality from spirituality is the greatest chidush of Yesh Me'ayin. And similarly, so it is with the avodah, the service, the interaction, the mission we have with engaging in physical things. Since Gashmius has no value, has absolutely no being compared to the vast quantum leap to Ruchnius. So what does that mean? That when we engage in refining Gashmius and transforming that into Ruchnius, that is a true hischachus, that's a true newness that has never been before. And therefore, this service, engaging in Gashmias and transforming Gashmias into Ruchnius, is real chiddush. It's called kitivna when you build a new house, because this is the real new thing. This avodah is to make a chiddush, to make something new in the bayis, in the body. And through that we build a dwelling for Hashem. Hey, says the Rebbe, the same way that this avodah is in a way of ischachus, in a way of newness. The avodah itself, in other words, the mere concept of transforming Gashmis to Ruchnis is a chidush. It's something new, something fresh, unexpected. So the same thing is also about the person who serves. What becomes achieved by the person who does Avodas Hashem through other ways of Avodah, so that's a progression that is relative to the previous level. But through the Avodah of refining Gashmias of the world, the person becomes elevated in a way of Chiddush, in a non-relative way, ein areich, quantum leap, in a total jump, because he's doing something that's a chiddush. More than that, this avodah actually creates a chiddush above, so to speak. As it says, Hakil b'dei Shemaim, everything is in the hands of heaven, chutz mi'yirah Shemaim, except for the fear of heaven. So, what we are really creating new things is when we are doing what Hashem wants, because it's our free choice, remember? If this too would be in the hands of heaven, that we are destined to either do the right thing or the wrong thing, then we lose our free choice. One of the critical components, ikrim, one of the bastions of one of the main aspects of faith, is that we do have free choice. Everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven. In other words, except for our moral choices of doing what Hashem wants, or God forbid not. as our sages tell us, that through our avodah we add koyach in Hashem's strength in Gvura Shalmaila. So here, through making the dwelling place for Hashem in Tachtoinim, so this is a big chiddush because we're taking Gashmias and transforming it. So it's a chiddush that becomes by us. It's also a chiddush we bring above. You know the dynamics of how this chiddush works? Because what we're doing here is creating a dira for Hashem, a dwelling place for Hashem, a beautiful dwelling place. By engaging in the Gashmias and making it, imbuing it with Ruchnias, just to give a quick example. You're going in the grocery store and checking to see is it kosher or not kosher, so you're engaging in that food, right? You're rejecting what Hashem told you not to eat. You're taking what Hashem told you to eat, and now you're going to ingest it and have energy to study Torah. You're creating space in Hashem's world to reveal Him, creating a dwelling place for Him. Now it becomes a dirana, a beautiful dwelling place for Hashem. You know what it says about a dirana? The Gemara says that there are one of the things that creates a harchavas adas, it creates an expansiveness in a person's das, in a person's perception, is the having a nice house. So having a nice house for Hashem, so to speak, creates an expansiveness, kevayochel, so to speak, in the Adam HaElyon, in the supernal man, in Hashem. So you see what happens? We create a chiddush, we make a dinner for Hashem, and so to speak, Hashem also benefits from this chiddush. Why? Because when we talk about the Seder Shtalshlus, the order of descent, of the diminishing of the levels one from the other, there's a Hagbalah, there's a restriction, so to speak. Kavayochel, Hashem has restricted Himself, and how much godly light He's going to draw down into the world. There's the godly light that's able to be drawn down into the world, and then there's a godly light that's higher than the world. And then there's a higher light that's totally way beyond the world that you can't even talk about connecting the world to it. But through the Avodah of the Yidden, that they make a harchava, they expand and make something new, right? Because they do something counterintuitive. They're taking Gashmias and creating Ruchnis out of it. It's a chiddush. So they create a chiddush also lamaila, and that draws down a light from Hashem that's totally beyond the worlds. Till we say that this is even, listen to this, square brackets, it's higher even than the light that preceded the tzimtzum, that was filling the space before the tzimtzum. You're talking about the deepest level, so to speak, in Atzmas and Hashem's essence becomes drawn down below. Through what? Through the fact that we engage in this chiddush, in a bayis chadash, and coming down into a body, and coming down into the world, and in entering in the world itself, and entering into the stage of having a millstone around our neck, of having to provide for a family, and so on. Says the Rebbe, the keli, how do you get to this chiddush? What's the keli? What's the vessel? What elicits? What allows for this chiddush? Bittul. Nullification, doing what you got to do without your own persona interfering. As we know, it's your dua, it's well known. When we talk about elevations, when the Rebbe says well known, the Torah, Samach Vav, and so on. It's well known. I'm sure you knew it. It's well known. When we talk about aliyahs, when we talk about, that's a very big, the Rebbe gives us a very big compliment. Expects us that we know the Torah, Samach Vav. So, Baruch Hashem. As known about when we talk about going up, aliyahs, that when the aliyah, when the ascent is not relative, is ein areich to the previous level, so before that aliyah, you need to have a cancellation of the previous level. Through that, you can become a vessel and you can clear the space to be able to have an additional ascent. Just like we know that to go up from the one Gan Eden to the other Gan Eden, there's a column and a river of fire in order to, so to speak, rid one of the vestiges of the experience of the lower level of Gan Eden in order to be a kamakeli to get to the higher level of Gan Eden. So that if you have preconceived notions, you can't get the new concept in a fully way, right? So in order to, so the pneumistic concept of creating a gate, a fence on the roof is, well, why do you make fences and boundaries? This maikeh, this fence, is that a yid puts up in the service of Hashem, is really again an expression of his bittul and his accepting the yoke of Hashem. In other words, you see, when Micah means what I'm not going to do. I'm going to put up fences, and it's an expression of not doing. When you say I'm going to do another mitzvah, that's great, but it's also, there's a self-expression there. When you put up a restriction, I'm not going to think about this. So that's a cessation of self, so to speak. It's the movement of bittul, of limiting yourself in the presence of Hashem, and that bittul is a preparation in order to have something new. This is the Bayis Chodesh, the new house, the new service of Hashem. And the Rabbi points out in Ha'ara 47, the second part of the Ha'ara, that since we're talking about making a Micah, is creating the newness of being able to make Hashem's dwelling place, so that will explain why this halacha really only applies to a base dira when you're making a dwelling place. Because if it applies to any house, so what's the difference? If you're talking just about danger, but if we here b'pnimius now we're talking specifically about a new avodah to make a dira for Hashem. The parallel in halacha is that this applies when you're making a dwelling, a dira. Now that we've explained that Micah means creating a bittul, a restriction, we can also understand why the Tama Pnimi, the inner reason, why the continuation of the pasuk is, it says, place a Micah, place a fence on when you build a new house, place a fence on your roof, and don't place blood in your house, because the one who's falling will fall. So, al pi halacha, it's not just a reason. Make a fence so the guy shouldn't fall. That seems to be one mitzvah, if so. No, but the Sifri says there's two mitzvahs. There's two separate instructions. Build a fence, don't allow a person to fall from your roof. The Sifri says, Vasisa Michael Agecha is a mitzvah. I say it's a doing mitzvah. Don't allow blood. Don't place the shedding of blood in your house. The person will fall from it. That's a negative mitzvah. I mean, if it's just a reason for building a fence, it should be just one mitzvah. Says the Rebbe, because in the Pnimis Onyan, what we see is that the inyan of Micah, the inyan of building a fence, is not just in order to stop, as the pasuk says, in order that the person shouldn't fall. No, but it's part of building a new house. In other words, Hashem says, when you're building a new house, when you're doing a chiddush, when you're coming to engage in the world, Micah, you have to have bittul. And then there's a second aspect. Also, you don't want to fall, because when you engage in this new Aveda, it's an Aveda of falling, it's an Aveda of descent. You got to make sure you don't fall. You got to make sure that this falling is not free falling, but it's controlled falling in order to elevate that which you come into contact with. Two separate aspects. Zion. The lesson from all this in practicality. We have to know that a person can't just lock himself up out of the world. You have to. The mitzvah is to go build a house. Make a dwelling place for Hashem in the lower worlds. And on the contrary, through this descent, in this way of serving Hashem, this brings about the ultimate ascent. The chidush down below, that we transform Gashmias into Ruchnis as Hashem instructs us, and the chidush above, because it creates a dwelling place for Hashem, and that creates a dwelling place, a nice dwelling place creates a harchavas adas, as we said. On the other hand, we have to know, hang on, not so quick, you got to be careful, don't rush headlong into this. In order to make from Gashmias a receptacle to Ruchnias, you need to make a fence, which means you have to also create a distance from the physicality of the world. Taka, you have to be involved in the world, but they have to be in a way, has to be in a way where they don't grab your entire being. In other words, there's a little bit of a distance from them. You have to realize that what you're feeling is that the reason you're engaging in the world is in order to fulfill the kavanah of Hashem, to make a dir b'tachtenim, so that you you don't really get involved in all the flavors of the ice cream. I'm just using this as an analogy. You understand that the ice cream is good if it can cool you down in order to allow you to go and be in a good mood to give out a lot of tzedakah. That's an example, right? But don't really fall into the ice cream. Oh, now this person is trying every flavor of ice cream. In general, ice cream. I just use that as an example. Okay. Says that Ibn Ches. From here, we also have a special teaching from those that are preparing to get married. The Rebbe was saying this sikha. This is a sikha. You'll see in the end of the sikha. It's from a sikha from Parshas Tetzeh, Yud Gimel Elul in 1954, and the Rebbe says in a star that this was the marriage day. Yud Gimel Elul is the day of marriage of the previous Rebbe in the year Tov Rishon Nun Zayin. So that's why the Rebbe was saying the sikha then on the wedding anniversary of his Rebbe, of the previous Rebbe, of his father-in-law, and so now he's connecting it. That was the topic, to especially those that are getting married. We see from this the greatness of married life. Marriage is not just something for the individual Jew, it's for not just in his individual life. It's something that's got to do with Hashem's plan. That's why it's such a big to-do. When we get married, it's a big to-do because there's cosmic stuff going on. Hashem's energies, so to speak, being affected. Since that's when, why? Because that's what becomes the main service of Hashem, to make a dwelling place for Him, for Hashem in this lower worlds. And that creates, right, when we made a nice house, just like down below, the Gemara says it creates an expansiveness in ourselves. It creates our chavos hadas, so to speak, by Hashem. And that, in other words, a bringing of a new oil. So there's epic stuff happening when somebody gets married. On the other hand, we have to know, hello, when you build a new house, you got to make a fence, you got to put up the restrictions. L'cha'ira, Chassan is in the best place not to have any restrictions, because it says about a Chassan, Meichlim le'akol v'neisav, he's forgiven for all his sins. So you would think you don't have to make any new fences, any new restrictions, because he's starting off with a clean slate. So, says the Rebbe, the Torah says, on the contrary, not only do you have to make sure in the future, because, you're going to start doing stuff you're not used to doing. You were sitting in the yeshiva on the Gemara all day, and the Chassidus all day, and now all of a sudden you got to go out in the world. You could fall, as we said, right? So there's one aspect, make sure you don't fall, because you're in again, like you said, you're in a movement of descent. More than that, you got to make the fence. Why? Even because of your past. What do you mean? But the chassan is forgiven for all the past. No, because now when you reach a higher level, right? You're building a house for Hashem. You're on a higher level. You're in a chiddush world. It's not enough what you did the previous teshuvah. Now you have to have a higher teshuvah. Because now when you're in a bayis chadash, you have to make a maika. You have to even do teshuvah from the previous things. Because, a quick analogy, if let's say you have a wine stain on your Shabbos tablecloth, and you send it into the dry cleaner, and it comes back, initially you say, oh, wow, beautiful. Shabbos, when you come to the table and you look closely, you have time, you're not all, you look closely, you see, hey, there's still a little stain there. What happens is that when something gets cleaner, now you have the ability, and the little things you didn't notice before stand out more glaringly. So when a person becomes on a higher level through getting married, now he has a bayis chadash, he becomes elevated, he's involved in chidush. Now even the things from the past, he needs to revisit them and do a higher level of tshuva. Test. So similarly, this is also the concept of Micah. What is building a fence? As we said before, it's restricting yourself, separating yourself, not getting fully immersed in this world. So a person could say, since the Torah tells me I need to have, so to speak, a millstone around my neck, I need to get involved in creating a parnasa. So how can you tell me I should stay aloof and a little bit distant from the gashmis of the world? So you have to know that, hello, the purpose of getting married is there should be what it says, zochu, ish and isha. If they merit, then you have yud and hey, right? And then you have the shechina shruya. Hashem's presence rests between them. What does that lead to? To a bayis chadash osei ruchnius, to the connection of ish and isha with Hashem. We know the whole Shir Hashirim speaks about the analogy of Hashem and the Bnei Yisrael as man and woman, as a marriage. And that's what we're doing. When we get married, so we create, when we have zochu, shechina, we're meritorious, when the marriage goes properly according to Torah and with harmony, the shechina is between them. And that's being paralleled also, Hashem and Yidden. And there's two parts to this. The Kiddushin, we under the chuppah do two things at the same time. Kiddushin, which is giving the ring, and say Harayat Mekudeshes. The Kiddushin to the Eibishter, which means we become one with Elikus. And what happens also at Kiddushin, becoming betrothed, becoming connected, there's something else. The moment that a woman is Mekudeshes, she now becomes totally forbidden to the whole world, just like Hektish. That's where the word Mekudeshes. Mekudeshes means consecrated, which means special for each other. It also means, like Hektish, you're not allowed to use something that's dedicated to Hashem. The whole world's not allowed to use it. Now she becomes totally forbidden to anyone else but the man who was Mekadosh. So there becomes the aspect of Kodesh or Muvdal. You get married, and when you marry Hashem, you become separated from the entire world. Because, as we said earlier, why are we involved in the world is only in order to prepare for our husband. It's only in order because Hashem said so. To do what Hashem's intention was, to make a dira for Hashem. So therefore, there's understand the balance. Everything's in the balance. It's a big Aveda, it's a necessary Aveda. It's the purpose Hashem wants us here for, to come into the world, and then to get married, and to be involved in the world. At the same time, Maike, put up the fence. It's only, remember to use the world, not in a way, God forbid, that you fall. Although we're being told to fall, not free falling. Mindful falling, so to speak, descent in order to elevate, and make sure not to really take it too seriously. Don't take the world for the world. Understand that your involvement in the world is for Hashem. It's for your husband. It's for making the world a dwelling place for Hashem.